Okay, first I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wurundjeri people, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you all for coming here today and welcome. We've got quite a large crowd, but I'm sure we have a very important decision and quite a few important items on our agenda today. So thank you again. Just like to acknowledge also that our conditions here are not ideal due to COVID restrictions. We're only restricted to 25 people, 25 visitors in the council chamber today. We don't have to be double vaxxed, but you do need to wear a mask unless you've got an exemption, a valid exemption. So thank you for all wearing your masks today. Those who are outside at the moment and wish to ask a question, don't panic. You all have a turn. You know, whoever would like to ask questions, you just need to let our doorman know, Mr. Morgan, and when the time is right, he will then indicate to you that you're ready to go and ask a question. The other thing is I'd like to mention as well is we will not be relocating to the RSL Memorial Hall. A couple of reasons. Firstly is you need to be double vaxxed to go in there. And the second reason is we're undergoing some refurbishments at the moment and the floors have just been sanded and we've got the first seal being put down. So it's not really right to actually sort of stomp on that at the moment. So, and that's probably it for now until I go to the next one. Next item, we have. Also like to mention that we are digitally recorded in accordance with Council Policy EMCP2, and just to remind everybody that. There is to be no visual or audio recording of this meeting by any means, unless given permission by myself. We're moving on to the apologies, which we don't have any at the moment. We've got a full house. Do we have any approved leave of absence or any applications?
Thank you, Madam President. No, I haven't received any and we don't have any on the books at the moment.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3, announcements from presiding member. You might see in the agenda item, I have actually listed a number of activities that I have done in this last month. But on top of that, I'd also like to thank the public for actually talking to me over the last week or so in regards to the item 9.3.3, which is to do with the VC Mitchell Park. We've had some very good conversations and, you know, I really appreciate everyone's thoughts and opinions and helping us out to, you know, try and come to a resolution today. I did, however, receive one threat, which wasn't very constructive, but I just thought I'd mention that. Would like to thank also everyone who's actually contributed towards this project to get it to this far. I know the staff have worked very hard over the last 2 years to get it to this point. And I'd also like to thank the councillors who have been involved in this process as well. Just one more announcement I would like to make a point of is to do with code of conduct. The meeting today, we must all respect each other's opinions. There are 5 deputations today. We will have a number of questions, I'm sure, today from the public gallery. So please, no comments, no comments personal in nature, and no offensive or defamatory language. And that also includes towards any individual or any groups, whether that's sports groups, community groups and the like. All right, I'll move on to the next item of the day, which is declarations of interest. I'll pass you over to the CEO that will actually read out what declarations of interest we have today.
Thank you, Madam President. We have two elected members with declarations, with a variety of declarations each. One declaration from Councillor Atherton on item 9.3.3, which is the Sports and Community Precinct redevelopment. He has indicated an impartiality interest, as he is a member and life member of the Donnybrook Football Club. And just for those in the gallery, a reminder, an impartiality interest means that the elected member can still take part in that part of the meeting. Councillor Atherton has also registered a financial interest in relation to item 9.1.2, which has to do with proposed road naming for a subdivision at Grimwade Road in Balingup. And when we come to that item, Councillor Atherton will be required to leave the chamber while the council deliberates on that matter. Councillor Glover has indicated a variety of declarations, all in relation to item 9.3.3, the Sports Precinct project. They are appearing up on the screen for you, but I'll read them out. A proximity interest as a part owner of a property on Emerald Street, Donnybrook. A financial interest as the above mentioned property is an investment property. An indirect financial interest as the partner is a joint owner of the above mentioned property. And then so the proximity, financial and indirect financial all require ordinarily that elected member departs the meeting for that part of the item, that part of the agenda. And then there are a variety of impartiality interests as well. And I'll read those out. As a member of the tennis club, family members are members of the tennis club. The elected member is a member of the Ladies Hockey Club. Family member is a member of the Preston Thunder Football Club. The member is a volunteer processing kids sport applications for the Donnybrook Football Club. The family member is a member of the Donnybrook Netball Association. The member volunteers through scoring and timekeeping for the Donnybrook Netball Association. And the member has a family member who is a member of the Donnybrook Basketball Club. And lastly, a volunteering role for scoring for the Donnybrook Basketball Association. Thank you, Councillor Glover.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You're a very busy woman, Councillor Glover. Councillor Glover, did you wish to exercise section 5.68 of the Act?
No, I'm declining on that, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, public question time. 5.1, we have responses to previous public questions taken on notice. No, I don't think I have to read them out, do I? You'll see in the agenda there is a question from Simon McGuinness, or a few questions by the looks of it, and the responses are there as well. Item 5.2, public question time. Now, before I proceed with the first person who would like to ask a question, just first I'd like to say, please, we might have a few questions, so we're allowed 2 questions and 2 minutes per question. So is there any questions from the public gallery, please? Just coming, sorry, we've got Shane. Mr. Serkin, would you like to come forward and announce your name? And address. And address, thank you. Yeah, you can take your mask off while you're talking.
Thank you. Shane Sercombe from Donnybrook.
Do you have an address?
5 Cora Street, Donnybrook.
Thank you.
Has a risk assessment ever been presented to council regarding the VC Mitchell project?
Has a risk assessment.
Yes.
I will pass it over to the CEO.
Thank you, Madam President. A specific risk assessment hasn't been presented to the council. However, a variety of documents presented to council in terms of master plans and other documents have included risk elements within it.
Thank you. Next question.
If the project is passed tonight, at what point will the item come back to council?
Thank you for the question. I believe that the tender, well, the recommendation is to go out to tender and then it will be presented back to the council. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr Rose.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr Sercombe, for the question. If the officer's recommendation is upheld, and there are a variety of amendments which will be considered tonight, so there's no guarantee it will, the next available decision to the council will be considering the tenders received.
Yeah, so the council won't be reviewing any tender documents before they go to market.
Yeah, thank you. That's your third question, but we might just quickly get it in if that's possible.
That's the officer recommendation. You're correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Sercombe.
Got some more if I've got time afterwards.
Yes, okay. I think, sorry, Mr Fowler, and then I'll go Mr Fowler and then Mr Peace.
Bradley Fowler, 28 Thompson Street, Donnybrook. My first question is, has the President or any of the councillors seen a 3D drawing or any elevation drawings of the proposed recommendation for tonight's agenda item 9.3.3? If not, what are you requesting to go to tender on?
Thank you for your question, Mr Fowler. Two questions. I haven't seen a 3D drawing. I've seen a bit of a topography of the actual landscape.
Okay, that's good. No drawings, no elevations. That's good. So my question number 2.
There are elevations.
I believe there's plan view. Never seen any elevation. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Question number 2. Has the President...
Yeah, what was your other question? The first?
Well, the first question was, it wasn't 2 questions. It was,
Yeah.
have you seen any 3D or elevation drawings?
Answer was no. Elevation, but not the 3D drawings.
I don't know how you can get 2 questions out of that, but my second question is, has the President or any of the councillors seen the prepared tender documents for the proposal on tonight's agenda item? And if you haven't, how can you make a tender request?
No, I haven't seen the tender documents.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Mr Peace, would you like to come down? You're next.
Thank you, Madam President, for allowing me to ask a question. I have 2 questions. One relates to item number 9.3. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian Peace, 145 Marshall Road, Argyle. And most people, I think, know where Argyle is. But I have 2 questions. The first one being is that given the initial proposition that went to the state government was under the banner of the Donnybrook Community Sporting, Recreation and Events Precinct, is the proposition before the council tonight still in sync with that proposition that went to the government? And the reason I asked that was I was in the company of, in fact, the lady from the ABC questioned the former member for Collie Preston, the minister, about the community aspects of this proposition. So my question is, would the government, or is the government satisfied that there is enough community elements, and in terms of the whole name of that, in terms of what's being presented tonight, in terms of the overarching sporting, recreation, community and events precinct?
Thank you for your question, Mr Peace. Would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr Peace, for the question. Your question refers to whether the government would be happy, as in the state government would be happy with what's been recommended in the report tonight.
The recommendation, yes.
The recommendation. I won't know until we actually have an executed financial assistance agreement. However, I've spoken with the senior regional manager from the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries earlier today, whose advice to me was the recommendation that's been presented to Council he's supportive of, and his recommendation to the Minister or senior executives in the Department of Local Government would be to approve the residual of the $6 million going towards this project as it's recommended.
Thank you. My second one, if I may, Madam President, relates to the paper or the item based on naming of roads or streets or what have you that's here tonight. I see one named Thomas, I think, in the list. My previous experience suggests to me, as I understood, the emergency services, people like fire and ambulance and what have you, don't like similar names of streets or roads in local government areas, which can be confused in the matter of an emergency. So is this still in conflict with the fact we do have a Thomas Road, I think it is, not far away from where you live? So would this be the second Thomas Road or street in the Shire of Donnybrook Balingup?
Thank you for your question. I'll pass you over to the Director of Operations and he'll answer your question.
Thank you, Madam President. So there was a series of names that were presented with Thomas being one of them. Thomas was actually one of the ones that has been eliminated due for the very reason that you're suggesting. If there's a road name with a similar name within 50 kilometres, it can't be approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Peace. Mr Scafidi, I think, had his hand up next, and then Mr Dudell, you're next. Just your name and address, please, Mr Scafidi.
Tony Scafidi from Grist Road to the Big Apple, Donnybrook. I'd just like to make a comment that I'm not against what's going to happen with the football club, but I am against the extra things. That the $6 million that is funded to improve the football club is fantastic, and I think the football club should be more than happy to have that money available for it. But I don't see why the council and the ratepayers should fork out another $3 million of funding to support.
What is your question, Mr Scafidi?
It's coming. To support the system, because I don't believe it's... The question is the council and the councillors supportive of this motion? And if it is, the rates have gone up 10% this year, and in some cases have gone up 20%. And I believe that the increases, if the $3 million is injected to the community, is going to be ridiculous. I'd just like the councillors to support and make a decision in support of just the $6 million and no more funding from the council.
Was that a question?
The question is, what is the council going to do? And the councillors are going to do in this project.
Thank you for the question. It is an agenda item and it will be up for debate tonight, so there will be a decision made one way or another. We have a number of amendments to come and things like that. So,
good. That's
thank you.
Angelo Legiudice Road, Kirra. Does the Major Football Club project 9.3.3 have to be submitted to the Minister for final approval prior to being granted the $6 million for the project to proceed?
I'll pass you over to the CEO to answer that, but we have actually received funding already, part funding off that, through... Okay.
So for the balance?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr Legiudice. The internal operations of the state's delegations on these sorts of things, I don't know. I would doubt that a $6 million decision would need to go to a minister. I would expect that the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, the Director General, would probably have the delegation to sign off on this. I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but that is an internal process for the state government's consideration.
So it does have to go to the Minister then?
No, that's not my answer, Mr Legiudice.
So do you have another question?
I do. How are you going to present this Major Football Club project to the Minister without a feasibility study and a business case, given that this recommendation that will be voted on tonight is substantially different to the proposal that you put to the Minister as a shovel-ready project?
Thank you for your question. I'll pass it on to the CEO. I believe he has information on this.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you again, Mr Legiudice. As I mentioned before, I'm not sure that it needs to go to the Minister for approval. It's highly likely it'll just be dealt with under delegated authority through the department. In speaking with the Senior Regional Manager of the department, Mr Troy Jones, earlier today, his advice to me, which is consistent with his advice to me over the last 18 months, is what was the reference you made about feasibility?
Feasibility and business case.
Are not required. The governance process and the due diligence processes that the Shire has been through is above and beyond what he would expect for a project of this scale.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more questions.
Yep, thank you. Yes? Thank you. Just your name and your address before you ask a couple of questions. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is John Keenan. I'm a resident and ratepayer of the Shire, and I live at number 18 Walnut Street, Donnybrook. My question, Madam, is through the Chair, of course. How many people in the Shire, eligible ratepayers, are for this development, and how many are against it? Do you have those figures, or have those figures been obtained at any stage?
Thank you for your question, Mr Keane. I'll pass you over to the Chief Executive Officer to answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr Keenan, for the question. No, we haven't done a referendum or a poll to determine how many of the 6,200 odd people who live in the Shire are either for or against, and there's no obligation or prerogative that has to be done either.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Thank you, Madam Chair. In response to that, this is not, in my opinion, a simple matter of purchasing a lawnmower for the ground staff. This is a major project.
Is there a question? Yep.
Well, it's in response to the response that was made. I would have thought that being such a major project, that the ratepayers, eligible ratepayers of the Shire, should have been addressed and asked for their opinions.
Okay, so we can reword that as, do you think...
Excuse me. It's my pocket.
Oh. Do you think that, you're saying, do you think that the ratepayers should be asked, as in through a referendum or a poll? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam President. I can talk to the question. I think your question was whether the council thinks that needs to happen or not. Council can deliberate on that as part of its debate and consideration of the item later tonight. I will advise There has been some history of loan polls being undertaken previously within this Shire. I think there might have been a loan poll for the recreation centre in the 80s or 90s when it was built. There's a change in legislation in 1995.
It's my boot this time.
Okay. And the provisions for loan polls were taken out of the old Local Government Act, were taken out of the new Local Government Act when they were in the old Act. There's no provision or ability for a local government to do a referendum or a poll per se. It can certainly do consultation, it could do a survey, but it's not a loan poll, as it were.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for your questions. Yes. Yes, Mr. Hearn, you can step forward.
Madam Chair and CEO, councillors. Madam Chair, I have two questions, and they relate to.
Oh, name and address, sorry.
Bruce Hammond, 43 Leschenoldia Circle, Donnybrook, WA. I don't know whether that elevates me or not. Madam Chair, the questions I ask of the CEO are, I have two questions. Will the CEO please advise the criteria required by the Local Government Act for councillors to declare an impartiality or other interest in a matter before council? And does, in the circumstance where an impartiality of interest known to the CEO remains undeclared, does the CEO have any obligation with regard to that? And the second question I'll ask is, he may wish to answer them together. Will the CEO advise the basis for any resolve associated with impartiality interests declared or claimed with regard to the redevelopment of the Donnybrook Football Club and the associated sporting precinct? Thank you.
Yeah, you can go on that.
Yep. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Hearn, for the questions. I'm not sure if there's two or three in there, but I got the first one definitely.
I was trying to squeeze.
Yeah. And I think that if I can paraphrase your first question to make sure I've understood it, is what type of interests exist in local government matters? Yeah, yes. Okay. Well, we've seen them all tonight. There are proximity interests, which are matters where a decision is required on a development application or a subdivision or a major project, and an elected member or a staff member owns property which adjoins that subject site. So that's a proximity interest. The second is a financial interest, which quite commonly goes alongside a proximity interest. It's where an elected member or a staff member has a financial interest in a matter that's coming before council for a decision. So again, it's typically land development type projects, typically, not always. So it could be a subdivision application or a development application that that councillor or staff member might be a party to. The third is an indirect financial interest, and very similar, as the name would suggest, to a financial interest, but there's a step removed where the elected member or staff member has a closely associated person, like a family member, who's got an interest in an item coming to council. And the fourth, and I will say for those first three types of interests, proximity, financial and indirect financial, the elected member needs to leave the room for that part of the decision making of the council. The fourth is an impartiality interest, which is really a type of interest by association. You've heard quite a few tonight. It might be memberships of sporting groups or community clubs. And typically these tend to be sort of not-for-profit type arrangements, so there's no financial interest involved in it. So they're the four types of financial interest, and as I mentioned, we've seen all four on the agenda tonight, and councillors have done well to identify those and declare them well. I missed the second/third question. You might need to repeat it for me, Mr.
The
Hearn.
second part of the first question was, in the event of an impartiality conflict known to the CEO, not declared, has the CEO any obligation to deal with that in any way?
Madam President, you happy for me to answer that? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hearn. Again, it's a bit of a grey space. The Chief Executive Officer is nominated as the Shire's complaints officer. So all complaints in relation to councillor matters automatically come through the Chief Executive Officer. It's an enviable position to be in, but it's part of the role. there is no statutory or mandatory obligation for the CEO, knowing that an interest has not been declared, to take any action. However, if a complaint is lodged by a councillor, by a community member, by a staff member, I don't have any authority to not deal with that matter. So once a complaint is made to me as the complaints officer, I need to stamp it basically and send it on to the Department of Local Government.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Second question?
question.
The second question was, will the CEO advise the basis for any resolve associated with impartiality interests declared or claimed with regard to the redevelopment of the Donnybrook Football Club and associated sporting precinct? And I understand there were a list of them early on. Are there others that have been sought or brought to attention?
Madam President, you happy for me to answer the third question? Okay. The declarations that have been made have all been discussed, read out, and they'll be minuted in the minutes. I don't know of any others. I don't go looking and searching for them. When they're presented to me, my role is to make sure that they're minuted and recorded correctly.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. That was very sneaky, Mr. Hillman. Now, some other questions. Mr. Atherton, yes? Just for the recording, don't forget your name and address.
Yep. Rod Atherton, live at Donnybrook. Yeah, I was interested.
What street?
Sorry?
Street?
Egan Street.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I was interested in that last comment because one of the councillors has been pursued quite relentlessly by a little group in this town about financial interests, and they're all proven to be wrong, and it was a smear campaign. And I was interested to hear Councillor Glover tonight announce that she has a financial interest in the BC Mitchell complex. Has Councillor Glover declared a financial interest at each meeting before tonight?
I'll pass you over to the CEO. We'll have to refer to the minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Atherton, for the question. I'm not sure it's entirely appropriate for me to answer, but the Madam President may ask Councillor Glover if she would like to respond to the question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Glover.
With regard to the BC Mitchell Park Sporting Complex, I have not declared, I have not taken part in any of the debates or discussions around that in any council meetings. I've declared a proximity interest. I was at the time not understanding the financial interest in that because it wasn't clear whether either way, I needed to find evidence to see either way whether that would be the case or not. So that was not declared because it was an unknown factor at the time, but I certainly have not taken part in any of the conversations around that, and I haven't participated in any of the meeting items.
Thank you, Councillor Glover. Do you have one other question?
Well, what are the consequences for someone not lodging such an interest?
Can we answer that?
Yeah, you can.
Under the Act, it's a $10,000 fine or a two-year jail.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have... Yes.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. King, please still come forward. Just while you're coming forward, I will just add, in relation to penalties under the Local Government Act for non-disclosure of financial proximity and indirect financial interests, I've not seen in my tenure in local government any elected member prosecuted or issued a fine or any jail term over that. If you can cast your mind back to the City of Perth and Lisa Scafidi debacle, Lisa Scafidi didn't see any jail time, and she certainly didn't even receive a $1 penalty. So it's while the penalties are there in the legislation, they're for gross avoidance, I suppose, by elected members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr King, can you please quote your name and address?
Mike King, and my address is Radiator Road, Balingup. Well, Southampton, actually. First question is, council decisions have, over the years that I've been associated with the council, been fair and equitable for all residents and ratepayers. In this particular case, the project which was initially a project related to the sporting clubs, many of them, and also the entertainment area, has now morphed, because of the budget problems, into a rebuild of the Donnybrook Football Club rooms. My question is, in the past, the Balingup, and I'll give some examples, the Balingup Recreation Centre back in the 70s provided 1/3 of the monies required to build the Balingup Recreation Centre. The Donnybrook Bowling Club took a loan to do their upgrade a few years ago.
Your question?
Balingup, well, the question is, in this case, this is now morphed into a rebuild of the Donnybrook Football Club. Why is the Donnybrook Football Club not being asked to provide 1/3 of the monies required? And or have they been? Have they knocked it back?
Your question there is, why is the football club not being asked to contribute 1/3? Is that your question?
Should the football club be asked, and rather than ask the ratepayers who have nothing to do with the football club, many of them, why not ask the football club to provide the $3.5 million loan in much the same way that the Donnybrook Bowling Club did?
We'll just answer that question for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. There were two questions in there. The first question is, why has the project morphed into a development just for the football club? Well, there's no decision yet. The matter's being debated and considered by the council tonight. Whether it's morphed into anything, I suppose, is a matter for interpretation. Everybody will have different interpretations. Your second question, why not ask the Donnybrook Football Club for a co-contribution of, say, 1/3? The Shire is asking the football club for a co-contribution. It's not at 1/3 at the moment, but it's in the council report. It's in the order of $250,000, which is a long way short of 1/3.
Which is 1/10 of 1/3, isn't it? In effect.
It's 3/5 of, yeah.
3/10 of...
It is a sizable contribution for a small community club, but it's not 1/3 of the project cost. Absolutely, I wouldn't pretend otherwise. The financial ability for a small football club or sporting club to raise in the order of, I don't know, 1.5 million or something there, or $2 million, is just not going to happen in a small regional community. So I'm quite happy to pursue seeking a co-contribution from the club, and there will be opportunities for other types of in-kind contribution into the future in terms of maintenance and operating costs and things like that. But a 1/3 contribution, I think, is just over the horizon. I think too difficult.
Perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. King.
I'm sorry, that was question one that you've answered. You've made it into two questions, but let me ask my second question, or just touch on it anyway, because I think somebody else has already asked it. Should the council check that the grant is still available in this morphed scope of works? Will they give us $6 million for a football club rebuild, as opposed to what was billed as a multi-purpose sporting, recreation and entertainment precinct? That's the end of the question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. King. I think the CEO's pretty well answered that, but I can pass it over to the CEO to
No, I believe he hasn't.
Confirm. Yes.
I believe he hasn't. That was just my second question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. King. So your question, my interpretation of your question is, will the Shire check in with the state government that the contribution of 5.75 mil bearing in mind $250,000 has already been secured, would still be available under the recommended, the recommendation to council in tonight's agenda item. Have I interpreted your question correctly?
You're saying, my question was, have you? And your answer was you haven't, I think.
Madam President, yeah. I've spoken with the regional manager of the department this morning, whose advice is yes, the recommendation to council he would support. He doesn't sign off on the $5.75 million cheque though. So that's the answer.
Thank you. Now, are there anyone that has some new questions, or I'll revisit the previous members that would like more questions asked? Yeah, Shane's. All right, we'll put Brad, we'll go. No, is there any other new ones? Just repeat ones, are they? Okay, Mr. Fowler.
Bradley Fowler, 28 Thompson Street, Donnybrook. Just a little bit before I ask my question is, this feasibility study that was supposed to be done and a business plan that was supposed to be done by Anna Dixon Consulting has come back as an options analysis. So it is not a feasibility study, it is not a business plan, and it was only made available to the public on Friday, about 5:30 a.m. My question is, how can councillors make a consideration on this project that's before us tonight, 9.3.3, without sufficient time to analyse the Anna Dixon report?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Fowler. The Anna Dixon report was based on to have the events precinct as a commercial enterprise. So the analysis was about whether the facility was going to be a viable commercial enterprise. And in doing so, she looked at various governance models and operational models. And her recommendation came back to say because there was no limited support for the community groups.
Sorry, did you say limited support from the community?
Yes.
Okay.
So of the community groups that she's recommended that, or you've probably read it yourself, so you know what the recommendations are.
Thank you.
I'll pass you over to the CEO just to add on to that.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Fowler, for the question. The council is not being requested to consider the governance arrangements and the operational arrangements tonight. So whilst the report is helping to inform the councils and the council decision, they're not making a decision or not being requested to make a decision on the governance model this evening. So the fact that it was released on Friday, I suppose, is not entirely relevant to the matter.
I've got one.
I will just add further to that. In my conversations with Mr. Troy Jones, as early as about 11 o'clock this morning, his advice is that ordinarily you wouldn't expect to see that sort of report at this stage of the project. It would come much later on after you've got tenders approved.
I've got a second question, but just to give a little bit of background to the second question, I also spent a long time on the phone yesterday to Mr. Troy Jones, and what you were saying is in direct opposition to what he told me. He told me a feasibility study should have been done right at the beginning of the project. My second question is, excuse me, I'm just trying to get the date correct here, but it's the 22nd of September 2021. I asked a question to the CEO And that question was, is the CEO going to conduct a feasibility study for the VC Mitchell Park project? Just to remind you, the answer that you gave was yes. There was a council resolution on this matter requesting me to undertake a feasibility study. My question is, when are you going to conduct the feasibility study?
Thank you, Madam President. I had a conversation with Mr. Troy Jones this morning, who relayed his conversation with you from the day before.
Thank you.
And his advice to me after your conversation with the Shire President yesterday around this matter is he did not discuss feasibility matters with you.
He certainly did.
Well, one of the two people on that phone call are not telling the truth, I suggest.
Are you saying that I'm lying?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay. I think we'll end there. Thank you. Can you please take a seat? Do we have any more questions? Yeah, Mr. Sercombe, oh, come on through.
Thank you. Have any of the current elected members done paid work at VC Mitchell?
It's, they have done any paid. I can't answer for the elected members. So,
Yeah, if we could put it to the elected members, if any of them have done paid work.
are you looking at recently or in the last, like 12 months
say
ago or 10 years ago, or you got a time frame on that?
Within the last 2 years, so with this project.
Yes, okay, we have one.
Cool. And would that meet the definition of a financial interest under the Local Government Act?
If it's the expectations, like if it's speculation, no. But if, for instance, anyone has a contract looking at and doing work there, well then yes, they would have a financial interest. But if it's sort of speculation that maybe not,
well, yeah. Chris maybe did put his hand up, so I'd suggest that there is a financial interest.
Yeah.
With at least Chris.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Sercombe, for the question. No, there's not a financial interest there. Just because work has happened in the past doesn't mean that it will happen in the future. And if you read the guidelines around this matter from the Department of Local Government, if there's a speculative nature to the financial interest, then it doesn't need to be declared.
Thank you. I've got another question, if I could, while I'm up.
Yep, one, yep.
At what stage do you hope to do a governance model, and would it be unwise to do a governance model after tenders have gone to market? As if the government model isn't achievable and you've already advertised the tender or entered into a tender, would it not make that governance model waste of time and you've got a white elephant?
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Sercombe, for the question. The report prepared by Anna Dixon entertains and provides a lot of research and advice in relation to governance models. So that piece of work sort of ticks that box in terms of looking at the governance models.
Well, it says do not go ahead, basically. So there's no governance model has been identified out of that as being feasible, yet you're still going ahead.
You can go.
Oh, no, you go. You go. Yeah.
That Anna Dixon report, the governance model was looking at a commercial enterprise.
And so
Not
why are we
a
building
community hub.
commercial restaurant and bar facility if it's not a commercial enterprise? And yeah.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you again, Shane. The recommendations on page 34 of that report give a very clear recommendation for 3 different options in a preferred order. I know that you know this, but others in the gallery may not. The order of preference for number 1 is a blended management model, and that blended management model, that governance model, is explored in the report. So there's a clear recommendation there in terms of that consultant's recommended path forward.
I think by being the first one, it was the worst pick of a bad bunch, and
What's your question?
We're not even going with. At what point are you going to do a governance model? She's recommended a blended model, but you're not going with a blended model. So, at what stage is the governance model going to be decided? You're saying that's going to happen after it goes to tender.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. The discussions I've had with the department, who have probably done dozens of these sorts of projects across the state, is to entertain the governance models once you've come back from tender, so you know what you're going to build.
Once you've gone to tender, it's too late. And
That's enough questions, please. Can you please step down? Take it in turns. Thank you. Do we have someone else? Mr. Judas? Yep. Thank you.
Angela Legiudice Road, Kirra. I'm just going to rephrase a question that was previously asked. Has the football club committee / membership been approached to make a contribution commitment prior to borrowing $3 million, given that the major expenditure is focused on the football club, as other sporting clubs in this community have done in the past?
I'll pass you over to the CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thanks, Mr. Legiudice. Yeah, it's in the council report, and I think I've answered that before. There's a negotiation with the football club, with the Shire, with the football club, for a co-contribution of $250,000. That's not set in stone. There may be strings, there may be conditions, there may be caveats that come along with that, but we're in the negotiation process at the moment.
So is this prior to borrowing? Is that going to be settled prior to borrowing?
Yeah.
The horse is bolted after that.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam President. The sequence will happen when the sequence happens. The Shire hasn't borrowed anything at the moment.
Yep, I understand that.
And so it'll be my intent to wrap up that negotiation with the football club and potentially any other contributing parties before the Shire finalises its co-contribution, its final co-contribution amount. I can't guarantee it'll happen before, but that's my intent.
Excellent. Has the business community / Chamber of Commerce been consulted regarding the sporting precinct project, and what was the response?
Thank you for your question. As far as I know, no, I don't think they have. Unless you have some information.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I will just echo Madam President's comments there. I'm not 100% sure there has been consultation on that with the Chamber of Commerce. I know we've had consultation with them with regards to fun parks and station squares and good sheds and things like that, but I'm not sure about this precinct. I'd have to take a little bit further research on it.
Okay. Can I just suggest that at the briefing meeting, that same question was asked, and you, Mr. CEO, did say that you had consulted with the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Mr. Legiudice. If I do remember saying that, absolutely, and I apologise. I apologise because I think I am incorrect. And I'm happy to say I'm incorrect in that instance. The consultation I think that I was thinking about was to do with the goods shed rather than the sporting precinct. So, yeah.
Thank you. Would you like to come down? Please state your name and address.
Chantel Wood, 21A Steer Street. I was just wanting to know, as a ratepayer and someone who lives directly opposite where works are currently happening with regards to the area next to the tennis club, if this project is to go ahead with regards to the football club, Will we be notified? Because currently there is work going on at hours I don't believe to be inside the bylaws. So I was just wondering if we're going to be notified that when those times do occur so that we are aware of those events.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll refer to the CEO.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the question. If you haven't, well, you're telling me you haven't received advice with regards to it, and I'll take that absolutely. I'll see that that's rectified in the future. Yeah, generally, where we have subcontractors preparing large amounts of work, similarly to what's happening on Collins Street with Carbonis at the moment, there are notification letters that go out to adjoining and nearby landowners and residents. So yeah, that is our normal practice. If we've missed that on this instance, I apologise. And we'll pick that up in the future. And thank you for letting me know about it.
No problem.
Yeah. Right, are there any further questions? Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Leith Crowley, 8 Union Street, Donnybrook. And you'll all be delighted to know I'm not asking about the football precinct. My question is regarding confidential items and how they're presented to council and then put out into the public. I'll use a couple of items which are just an example. It's not directly attributed to any specific resolution previously done by council, but we'll use it as an example. So in reference to unconfirmed minutes of the 25th of August 2021, and this is just an example, items 12.1.1 and 12.1.2, will the minutes be corrected to make public the decisions, resolutions, made by council behind closed doors? Now, I'm happy for this question to be taken on notice because I'm reasonably certain no one will have the answer. My understanding is that this is a reporting requirement under Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, Regulation 11C and D and Regulation 13.1B. If I'm correct, will Council review past minutes to fix the underreporting that has possibly occurred? I'm going into the third question territory here, but I'm going to tie it together anyway. If Council deem that I am incorrect, would they please seek clarification from the Department of Local Government? And I look forward to your response. Thanks very much. So as I say, I'm happy to take for it to be taken on notice.
Thank you very much. I think that's probably wise.
And I'll leave a copy with the doorman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Crowley. Are there any other questions before we move on? Any out in the back gallery? No? All right, thank you very much for all your questions. We move on to presentations. We don't have any petitions today. We don't have any presentations. But we do have a number of deputations. Now, before I go any further, we do have 5 deputations. So I'm going to limit the deputations to 10 minutes, no more. And just another word as well, just remember the code of conduct. So please refrain from any misbehaviour, or you'll be asked to sit down. And you'll receive one warning. If there's something that I pick up, you'll receive one warning, and then the second time you'll be asked to resume your seat. Thank you. The first one we have is actually a dial-up. It'll actually be a phone conversation to Queensland. It's Mr. Michael Sheehan.
Connected to 2 mobile devices.
Hello, Michael. Can you hear us? Hello, Michael. Are you there, Michael? Hello, Michael, can you hear me?